Glad you guys are here this evening as we go through the book of Proverbs. We're going through it rather slowly, but that's okay. A lot of material to cover in the book of Proverbs. Lesson 37 tonight, and I've titled it, Actions Have Consequences. Everything you do will create, there's a law in physics, I was going to start with that called a law of action and reaction. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's just a law of physics. But beyond physics, in everyday life, the same principle applies. Everything you do has consequences, whether you like it or not. Your actions and your words will also affect your future, not only in this life, but in the next. Someone said you're free to make your choices, but you are not free to choose the consequences. Jump off a building and you'll see gravity has consequences. Try to strike a law enforcement officer and you will see there are consequences. Our lives are a series of actions and resulting consequences. There's this principle I want to share with you called sowing and reaping. In Hosea chapter 8 verse 7, the Bible says, if you sow to the wind, you will reap the whirlwind. This is a spiritual law that God has put in place, and you cannot escape it. We call it the principle of reaping and sowing, which says you reap what you sow, you sow more than you reap, and you reap later than you sow. You reap more than you sow. Someone's paying attention. And you reap later than you sow. Many people go around this life thinking that God is disinterested in what they do. And I believe this also can be applied to Christians. They live their life thinking that now I'm saved, I can go ahead and live my life the way I want to. But unfortunately, there are consequences with living in such a way. God is not passive toward our sins. There's coming reckoning. Even Christians will have to give an account for what they have or have not done for God at the judgment seat of Christ. In Ezekiel chapter 7 verse 9, God makes it clear that his eye shall not spare. He says, neither will I have pity. I will recompense thee according to thy ways and thine abominations that are in the midst of thee. And ye shall know that I am the Lord that smiteth. Those who think they are getting away with their sin today, I have news for you. One day you will stand before God and you will have to give an account of every action. I would rather have Christ wipe away my sins now than have to account for them at the white throne judgment. John chapter 3 verse 36 says, he that believeth on the Son hath everlasting life, and he that believeth not, and this is what I want to stress, and he that believeth not on the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abideth on him. So every lost person is walking around and it's like God's wrath is right over them. The only way you can appease God's wrath is through Jesus Christ. These are the consequences for not believing in God. Someone said if you have to sneak to do it, lie to cover it up, or delete to avoid it being seen, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. Yep. Hard work pays off. I said this introduction because as we will see in verse 20 of chapter 18 in the book of Proverbs, we see this principle of actions having consequences. A man's belly shall be satisfied with the fruit of his mouth, and with the increase of his lips shall he be filled. Our living depends on what comes out of our mouth. I'll give you an example. If you mouth off at your boss, guess what will happen to you in short notice? The boss is not going to take that too kindly. So the boss will say, well, there's the door. This verse sounds similarly to Proverbs chapter 12 verse 14, which says, a man shall be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth. And we covered that in lesson 20. Much of what we reap, much of what everyone reaps is connected to what we say. You mouth off to the wrong person, you're liable to get a bloody nose. I knew a kid we grew up with in our neighborhood. He passed away a few years ago. And I remember he was younger than me, but he was a bully. And I remember a story I heard from one of his friends. all of a sudden I found his character change. He was a little bit more timid, more humble, more quiet. And the story was that he went to a bar one day and he mouthed off at the wrong guy, and the guy just took care of him. He gave him a piece of humble pie. So you have to be careful with what comes out of your mouth. You'll be satisfied with the fruit of your mouth. Kind words, good fruit. Evil words, bad fruit. The power of the tongue. The tongue is very powerful. You'll see this again in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. I couldn't say it better myself. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Remember, we've said this principle before. Words can heal and words can hurt. And oftentimes you hurt the ones you love through the words that come out of your mouth. It is so true that death and life are in the words. 19 times the word tongue is mentioned in the book of Proverbs. The Bible has much to say about your tongue. There's a Hebrew saying. It comes from the Midrash, and it says this: the evil slays three, the evil tongue slays three, the slanderer, the slandered, and the listener. Your tongue is an instrument can be used as an instrument of destruction. It is often true that what you love will come out of your mouth. Yep. So when you hang out with someone, you quickly know what their hobbies are. You quickly know what their interests are. If they always talk about video games, guess what they do most of the time? They play video games. If they talk about cars, guess they're into cars. If they talk about whatever subject they talk about, that's often the subject that they are in love with. So we have commented exclusively on the tongue as we through the book of Proverbs. Now let's go to chapter 18, verse 22. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this verse because I believe this is a very important verse in the book of Proverbs. 18:22 says, "Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor from the Lord." You see that? Being married is a good thing. You see some young people, they think they're going to, especially some young ladies, they're going to think they're going to grow up to be old maids. I remember one time I was teaching Wednesday night. My wife knows exactly what I'm going to say. We had the teenagers at the church we used to go to up in South Carolina, and I asked the young girls a question, and I said, how many of you girls think you're going to grow up to be an old maid? And pretty much almost girl raised their hand. And most of these girls were not even 16 years of age. And I told them, I said, if you're 25 and you're still not married, then come and we'll talk. But you have nothing to be concerned about at 13, 14, 15, 16 years of age. I want to remind the young people that Genesis chapter 2 verse 18 says, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him an helpmeet for him." This is the first time in the creation account that God says it is not good. Everything that God created, he prefaced it by saying, it is good. It is good. But God said, for man to be alone, it is not good. So what does that tell you? That tell you that God does not want men and women to be alone. He wants them to get married, have families, and have children. Now there are exceptions to the rule, but the general rule is that God said he is the one who instituted marriage. So when a man finds a woman, he is sticking to the plan that God has ordained himself. Marriage is an institution established by God. We have many groups today in our society that advocate the disruption of the family. In fact, there's this one group that has come of notoriety lately. It's a group with the letters BLM. On their website, they want to disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. And when someone called them out on that, they quickly scrubbed their website and removed that from their site. And they are defending them, and they're saying, well, that's not what they really meant. Well, if you did not really mean that, then why did you use the word nuclear? If you look up the word nuclear, it's very specific when it comes to a family. That means a nuclear family is one that is comprised of a mother, a father, and children. They want to destroy the nuclear family. You can read into that all you want, but it's exactly what it means. The thing is, whatever God has ordained, the devil wants to destroy. God ordained the family. Guess what the devil wants to do? He wants to destroy the family. Matthew 19:6 says, "Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder." God hates divorce. When God says when two people are joined together, I want them to stay together. God has ordained that. Now, when this verse is talking about finding a wife, equates to finding a good thing, we are to understand that God is speaking of a good wife, because in Proverbs chapter 19 verse 14, which we will come to that in a few lessons, says, "House and riches are the inheritance of fathers, and a prudent wife is from the Lord." A prudent wife, a woman who is careful about the way she acts and speaks and what comes out of her mouth. The writer takes it for granted that the good thing the man finds is a prudent wife. Again, we're going to look at the wife again when we get into chapter 19. And again, when we look at chapter 31, that talks about, we call this the Proverbs 31 woman. God has a lot to say about women in the Bible. Let's move on. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 23. We'll see that, again, this verse talks about money, and it tells us what money does to people's attitudes. Verse 23 says, "The poor useth entreaties, but the rich answereth roughly." Have you ever ran across a beggar, and when he approaches you asking for money, what is his attitude toward you? He's very apologetic, he's very kind, he doesn't want to bother you. That's entreaties. Why? Because he wants something from you, he wants money from you. He's poor. He pleads and begs for it. The poor person cannot buy himself out of a jam. We've mentioned one of the things that gives rich people their attitude is that when they get into a jam, they can what? They can buy themselves out of it. If they get in trouble with the law, they can hire the best attorney. When their car breaks down, they just buy a new one. When the washing machine breaks down, they just buy another one. That's the difference between a poor man and a rich person. He can buy himself out of these things. The working person always shows respect to his employer. When I go to work, I respect my boss because I don't want to lose my job. But likewise with everyone else who has a job. It makes you be humble. But a lot of times what men do is they're humble on the job site because they don't want to lose a job. And when they come home, they become brutes and bullies. Brutes toward their wives and bullies towards their children. You always used to know these men that were like that because I'm not going to get into it because I'm going to get myself in trouble. Through their management style, you can tell how a man is in the home. Rich people trust in the riches. They become arrogant because of the riches. They know that money can buy them out of a lot of trouble. And the Bible reflects this in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 19. Listen to what the Bible says. "A feast is made for laughter, and wine maketh merry. But money answereth all things." You see that? Money answereth all things. Now the Bible talks about money as a tool. The problem becomes when people love their money and they trust in money. The rich people have no use for everyday people. All you got to do is look at the entertainers of this world today. They say that off camera they are some of the nastiest people in the world. We have a society that idolizes the rich, that idolizes the famous, the entertainers, and they always want to come across to you as that they're happy, they're better off. So what does the average person do? They strive for money. But the fact is, money ruins people. Our world is addicted into accumulating money. One more dollar is the motto of some people today. They save and scrounge, and then in the end they pass away and they leave the money to their children. It's sad when you have people saving all their lives and then getting old, passing away, and never once enjoying the fruit of their labor. There was this one man, I want to give you the story. His name was Jack Whitaker. He won the Powerball. At the time he won it was $350 million. And he said this: "I wish that we had torn up that ticket." What happened when he got the money? They started living the lifestyle of the rich and famous. And both his wife and his daughter developed a drug addiction problem, and he lost his family. They say this is the facts, the statistics. 70%, over 70% of lottery winners end up broke or worse off than the day they cash the big check. It's a fact. Money ruins people. Sometimes you see people, well, why am I not rich and wealthy? Well, have you ever thought that perhaps God has withheld you from becoming wealthy because he knows it would ruin you and change your heart? You say, oh, it wouldn't change my heart. Well, how do you know? We have statistics over here. It does ruin people. It makes people very arrogant. You run into some very rich people and you see how arrogant they are. The next verse I want to look at, and this verse is a little controversial, only because of a translation issue that some have brought up, but we're going to deal with that a little bit. It's verse 18:24 in the book of Proverbs. This verse says, "A man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother." It is true in life, even though some people may argue against the accuracy of the translation of this verse, the precept in this verse as it stands in our Bible is very correct. Have you ever thought of why is it some people have more friends than other people? There are some people that hardly have any friends, and some people have a lot of friends. I remember last year when I went to Greece, my dad passed away last year, so I went to his funeral, and I got a chance to meet my cousin. And I met her husband once. I think when she was engaged, she came to visit us in Canada. So we were just sat down, we were catching up. It had been, I believe, about almost 30 years since I've seen him, since I've seen my cousin. So we were catching up, and now his kids were grown. And when the last time I saw them, they had no kids. But his daughter was in college. She had just started college, and she was complaining to her dad that she didn't have any friends. And her dad says, "I can fix your problem instantly." She goes, "How, Dad?" She goes, "Go around nicely and ask a few people at the college. Say, hey, is it okay if I can have your phone number?" Just ask 5 people, and guaranteed you'll have one friend, at least one friend. So she did that, and now she has friends. So sometimes the reason why you don't have friends is because you don't interact with people. Mm-hmm. If you're a loner at home and you're a hermit, and you say, "Well, how come I don't have any friends?" and you're in your bedroom all day long, guess what? You're not going to make any friends. To make friends, you got to meet some people. You got to be friendly, and I believe that's a very basic principle. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to continue this principle. I want to ask you some questions here. If you're listening to my voice, what kind of a person are you? Are you someone that someone wants to become friends with? Are you trustworthy? Can someone count on you? Are you someone who is too busy to be bothered? Can you lend someone a hand if someone is in a jam? Are you going to be there for them? Are you abrasive by nature? Are you standoffish? If someone were to think of a good friend, would they think of you? I have a couple of friends in mind that I know that if I were to call them now, they would drop whatever they are doing to help me out. And I would do the same thing for them. They would call me right now where the phone says, "Hey, I need some help. I need you to come tomorrow." I would drop everything I have for them. And I know they would do the same thing for me. But the issue becomes, I brought up this briefly, and I believe I need to share this with you. Some people say that this verse shouldn't be translated this way because the Hebrew says something else. And we're not going to dig too much into the Hebrew, but I just want to make you aware of this issue, that it is a real issue. And I don't think people have the right answer. Sometimes when you come to the original languages, it's very hard to, and this is the exception, not the rule. There are some places in the scriptures that you can say, yes, it's kind of hard to translate it. I'll give you 2 versions that have translated this verse differently. The reason why I'm bringing this up, because I want to point out to the fact that translation sometimes changes how you interpret a verse. Yes. Proverbs 18:24 in the NIV says, "One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." The ESV has, "A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother." Now here I have the 3 Hebrew words. Now this whole expression in our Bible, "A man that hath friends must show himself friendly," is translated from only 3 Hebrew words. The first one is ish. So in Hebrew, and I'm no Hebrew scholar, so if you read the Hebrew, it would be ish re'im lethit ro'eah. 3 words, that's it. So the first one is man, the second one is friends, and the third one is, that's the question mark. Some have translated must be friendly and come to ruin. One Hebrew version has it, even the Hebrews themselves are not agreed on how to translate this verse. So if they are not agreed on how to translate this verse, then how do you expect English people to agree on how to translate this verse? One Hebrew version has it, there are men who pretend friendship. Now we know this is not correct because we know the word man in Hebrew is singular, it's not plural. So even they messed up on their translation. Some say that this is a pun because the word re'im and ro'eah kind of rhyme together. So there's also literal liberty taken in some of these books of poetry, and we know that Proverbs is one of the books of poetry. One thing we do know that this verse is a verb. So when you say ruin, ruin is a noun, it is not a verb. So I just want to point this out. I can't expand more on that because I'm not a Hebrew scholar. I know just a little bit to make me dangerous, and that is not enough to satisfy the answer. But I'm going to stick with what our Bible has. A man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and that is, I think it makes more sense than having many friends you become to ruin. Because think about this: will you come to ruin based on the number of your friends or on the type of your friends? Type of your friends. There are some people that have many friends and they have not come to ruin. There are some people that end up with one bad apple in school, and those two cause a lot of trouble. So I don't think it's the number of friends that brings you to ruin.
Isn't there also a verse that there is safety in the council of men?
Yes, someone brought up the point that there is safety in the multitude of counselors. So that's true. But I don't know if you can make that connection, but that's a good point. But I want to also look now at the second half of the verse. The topic of the brother appears again. The Bible tells us that there are some friends that are better to you than your own brother, and that is true. We have the example of David. What does David say? Let me ask you this. Who was David's best friend? Jonathan. And if you read the interaction between David's brothers, it wasn't positive. In fact, his oldest brother Shimei, rebuked David when he came to see the war. In fact, David's dad sent him to the battlefield so he can bring some food, some snacks, we can say, some Slim Jims to his brothers, some cheese sticks to his brothers. And but his older brother rebuked him. Little did he know that David, the runt of the family, was going to slay the enemy of Israel that day. Look what David says about Jonathan in 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 26. I am distressed for thee, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant hast thou been unto me. Thy love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. And some people we know have taken this verse and have twisted this verse. Our Western mindset does not know what true love is. One of the things I can tell you, many times you hear about many men in the military, and they would die for their friends. I was just watching a YouTube video yesterday about a soldier. He lost his hand. A grenade fell in the midst of his buddies, and he didn't want anybody to get hurt, so he grabs the grenade with his hand, and he didn't get a chance to throw it. It blew up in his hand, and he lost his hand. He was willing to die for his buddies because he loved them. Well, that's one thing I like about some of the military guys. They would die for their buddies. Too bad we don't have too many Christians that would die for their fellow Christians. On this topic of friends, the greatest friend anyone can have is Jesus. And here he gives us the ultimate character, quality about being a friend. In John chapter 15, verse 13, he says, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Then he says in the next verse, ye are my friends if you do whatsoever I command you. What a friend we have in Jesus. So that comes to the end of chapter 18. Let's move on to chapter 19. Again, any questions or comments before we go on to chapter 19? Okay. This is a lot of Proverbs in this passage. We're just going to briefly look at them. Some are repeats of previous Proverbs, so we're not going to spend time on those. So let's read the first 7 verses of chapter 19. Better is the poor that walketh in his integrity than he that is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Also that the soul be without knowledge, it is not good, and he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. The foolishness of man perverteth his way, and his heart fretteth against the Lord. Wealth maketh many friends, but the poor is separated from his neighbor. A false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape. Many will entreat the favor of the prince, and every man is a friend to him that giveth gifts. I love some of these Proverbs and how they're worded. They make so much sense. They peer right into the human nature, Verse 7, all the brethren of the poor do hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He pursueth them with words, yet they are wanting to him. Poor people have few friends. Verse 1 says, better is the poor that walketh in his integrity than he that is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Sometimes poverty is not a fault of your own. Sometimes you're poor not because you're lazy or because you are or a failure, but sometimes things happen in life because that cause you to be poor. Someone called me today that wanted to know if we're meeting for church, and he was a young man. I think he told me he was 30 years of age, and he was all alone because he lost his mother, he lost his sister, and he lost his brother. Then he turned to alcohol, and then he was wanting to get right with God and wanting to get back into fellowship. He has no one. He's all alone. Now, I'm not saying that he's poor, but the point I want to make is sometimes there are circumstances in your life that cause you to be poor. You can think of the mother who her husband leaves her alone with several children, and he doesn't pay his child support or his alimony. And you hear the stories of many women struggling to raise their children on their own. Sometimes it's not your fault. It just happens. We know that many times the book of Proverbs criticizes the poor because of laziness, not because of any other situations in life. And in this verse, Solomon recognizes that sometimes poverty comes about, and it's not necessarily a result of moral failure or weakness on the part of the person. But the distinguishing factor of these people that are poor because of unfortunate circumstances in life is that they have integrity about them. They walk in their integrity. They do the right thing regardless of their circumstances. They don't blame someone else for their problems. They don't blame the man for their poverty. And here this verse tells us that the fool is perverse. Here I am to take, and you can actually read into this verse, but it's not explicitly said, that this person here is rich, because it's a contrasting proverb. The poor has integrity, but this person is a fool because he is perverse, and we are to assume that he's a rich person. You don't have to look far today. All you got to look at is the airplane log of Jeffrey Epstein's, what do they call that? The Lolita Express. Just look at the logs and they have released these logs. And all these rich and famous people that visited his island, they're perverse. They are all rich. Don't tell me the average person would rub shoulders with Epstein. You have to be rich and famous to do that. These people, according to God, are fools. What upsets me is that what happened to these people? Nothing. All these girls came out and said what was done to them, the testimonies, but no arrests. Nothing happened. It's unfortunate that we live in a world that we live in today. Let's go on to verse 2. Also, that the soul be without knowledge, it is not good, and he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. When I read this verse, the first thought that came to mind is the expression that people say, ignorance is bliss. How many of you guys have heard that? Yeah. Ignorance is bliss. It's not. God says ignorance is no excuse. In fact, there's even a law today that says ignorance of the law excuses no one. Just because you do not know the law or are unaware of its contents does not excuse you from the punishment of the law. Even in the Old Testament, God made provision in Leviticus chapter 4, verse 2. If a soul shall sin through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord, even if you sinned and you did not know you sinned, you are still responsible for offering up the sacrifice. Lack of knowledge is what destroys people, according to Hosea 4:6. God says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee." What this tells me is that it's not that we suffer from lack of knowledge, is we suffer from refusal of knowledge. In Proverbs 1:24, wisdom says, "Because I have called," and what? "Ye refused." Zechariah chapter 7:11, God says, "But they refused to hearken, and pulled away the shoulder, and stopped their ears that they should not hear." The problem with people today is they refuse knowledge. When you pass out a gospel tract or you try to witness to someone, and they say no, what are they doing? They are refusing knowledge. They don't want to know, but instead they run toward their sin. Isaiah says in verse 7 of chapter 59, "Their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed innocent blood. Their thoughts are thoughts of iniquity, wasting and destruction are in their paths." Look what's happening in our country today. You have more people rioting, pillaging, burning than people in church. The church houses are empty. Oh, everyone's afraid of COVID, but they're not afraid of getting together and burning someone else's business or breaking down the windows of a shop or charging at police officers. It's unfortunate that our country has come to this condition. It's very, very disheartening when you see that. Belief in God in America is waning. I don't see any remedy. I see the way things are going. The Lord will have to step in and fix this mess. Next verse is very similar idea from the previous two verses that we read. "The foolishness of man perverteth his way." See how this is worded? "The foolishness of man perverteth his way, and his heart fretteth against the Lord." This means that if you are perverse in your thinking, then you will be led astray. And we know, where does perverseness come from? It comes from the heart. Proverbs 6:12 says, "A naughty person, a wicked man, walketh with a froward mouth." And verse 14 of that same chapter says, frowardness is where? In his heart. The perverseness of a person lies in their heart. He's got a bad heart. Unless God fixes your heart, you cannot fix your own heart. God intended for our hearts to be at peace with Him. And we know one thing that alienates us from God, that makes us enemies toward God, is our sin. The fool has sin in his heart. And he says, the verse says, he frets against God. That means he's constantly angry or bitter or agitated or upset towards God. The fool will blame God for ruining their life. Oh, it's God's fault. Oh, God, why did you do this to me? Have you heard people say that? God, why did you let this happen to me? You can't say that to God, because we live in a fallen world, and if you understand this, you will be spared a lot of heartache. Bad things happen to good people. We are not exempt from bad things because we are Christians or because you are you. Things will happen to you in your life. You may come up with a disease. You may get into an accident. Something horrible may happen to one of your loved ones. It's just the way it is. That's just life, and you have to accept it. Next verse number 4. This is pretty self-explanatory. "Wealth maketh many friends, but the poor is separated from his neighbor." As soon as you're rich and you've got money, all your friends call you from the woodwork. "Oh, you remember me?" "Yeah, I remember you. What do you want, money?" There was this one guy who called last week, and I had no idea where he was going at. But he was saying, "Oh, I visited your church, and I watched you guys on Zoom," and he kept going and going and going. And after a few minutes later, I realized what he was doing. He was trying to butter me up so I can give him some money. That's all he wanted, money. And then when as soon as I asked him what his address was, he just hung up. Never called back. Because I asked Annette, because I think she keeps track of who's come to the church or not. I said, do you remember anybody by this name? And she says, no. No. So they just call for money. There's an English proverb that says, rich folk have many friends, but when the money dries up, so does the friends. Remember the prodigal son? What happened to him? When his money was spent, he lost all his friends. He was all alone. We covered this principle in lesson 24 when we looked at Proverbs chapter 14, verse 20. Verse 5, we're not going to cover that because it's a commentary on thou shalt not bear false witness, which is the 9th commandment. False witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape. We've dealt with this concept in lesson 9, lesson 20, and lesson 23. All these verses, Proverbs 6:19, Proverbs 12:17, and Proverbs 14:5, contain the same idea regarding bearing false witness. And the next one, verse 6, says, many will entreat the favor of the prince, and every man is a friend to him that giveth gifts. I find two principles of human nature in this verse. One is those who flatter to gain favor. If you've heard that, the expression flattery will get you nowhere. But it's very true that some people like to be flattered. They like their egos to be stroked. And sometimes in the workplace, I have come across managers that way. And to be honest with you, I'm going to confess my faults before you. I've used that to my advantage. When I wanted to get something done in the workplace, because these people are so blinded and their egos are so big, you can actually convince them that your idea is their idea. It doesn't take much. I hate to say this, but I'm confessing my fault to you. I've done that at the workplace. I saw, this person I know how to get this guy to do what I need him to do. Just give me 5 minutes and he'll, in no time, he'll think my idea is his idea and he'll think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and he'll give me the green light to do it. Doesn't the Bible says we have to confess our faults one to another?
I think one of your coworkers wanted a job and he did use that to his advantage.
Yes, there was one of my coworkers, and he was interviewing with this manager, and he says, "Can you give me any tips on how I can get the job?" I said, "Yes." He loves to talk. He likes to hear himself talk. All you got to do is ask him a couple of questions inconspicuously, and before you know it, your interview will be over. You will not have said a word, and he'll have done all the talking, and he will give you the job. That's exactly what happened. There's a book out there someone wrote called Managing a Manager. Seriously, I kid you not. It's an actual book. A lot of times it's very important. If you're dealing with a difficult manager, you have to know what makes him tick, what makes him run. And I don't want to be in conflict with my boss. So you get to know your boss, get to know what makes them run, and you can manage a manager. And life, I'm telling you, life will be a lot easier. I'm not saying to do anything evil or wrong, but just get to know the person, what makes him tick, what kind of person is he. And it will actually help you instead of being in constant conflict at work. Anyways, that was free, by the way. Well, some things are more freer than others. Some things are more freer than others.
You didn't pay the door?
Didn't you pay the fee at the door to get in? No? That's okay. We're just giving my one of my sons a hard time. The other thing I find in this verse that everybody loves a handout. They love people giving gifts. And the politicians, every election cycle, you're going to find a politician who promises the world and delivers nothing. Free college, free healthcare, free housing, free childcare, free phones.
Yes.
There was a previous president that got elected, and I saw one person running around, so-and-so is now going to pay my mortgage. That person was convinced that now because they voted this president in, that he was going to actually pay their mortgage. And I'm watching that, I'm like, I'm going to say something now, I can't help myself, I'm going to say it. There has to be a test to allow people to vote. Give them a simple test. If they can't answer 5 basic simple questions, they shouldn't be allowed to vote. Again, my opinion, this is just strictly my opinion. I know everybody has a right to vote, but sometimes you hear these people and you say, who? Is anybody home? They allow you to vote? I'm just gonna move on because I'm going to get myself in trouble. But people are expecting something for nothing. Who's going to pay for all this? Somebody has to pay for it. Eventually, the government's going to have to tax you more. They can't get... Somebody, Nina's laughing. She had to laugh. But nothing's free. Nothing's free. But that's okay. Let's move on. Last verse so we can finish on time this evening. All the brethren of the poor do hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He pursueth them with words, yet they are wanting to him. It's a sad fact that the poor are often rejected by society. And this verse tells us that even family members hate the poor. Their brothers and sisters. That is so sad. And then this verse tells us that by nature, people run from the poor. Remember I mentioned the fact when you see some homeless person come up to you. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you see a homeless person approach you?
They want money.
That's right. They want money to buy alcohol, Evelyn says. But they want money. They're going to ask you for money. So that's why people go away sometimes from the poor. And the sad part is that we have to take care of the poor according to the Bible. And I have, sometimes they accuse us conservatives of hating social programs. I think the social programs that we have in place in our country are a good thing. And they should be a safety net for those who actually need these programs. If you're able-bodied and you can go work, then go work. And I think the government should, my opinion again, should have programs in place that if you are receiving any assistance from government, they should somehow do something for it. Yeah. Go out and maybe beautify some parks or help fill data for some government agencies. Do something. Find something for these people to do. Just my opinion again. But the truth is, our society often neglects the poor. But thank God that our Lord God and Savior takes up the cause for the poor. And I want to also point out something that I learned years ago. The war on poverty, you are never going to win the war on poverty. Because Jesus says in Matthew 26, verse 11, for ye have the poor, what? Always with you. When Jesus says something, when God says something, you cannot change that. He said you will always have the poor. What does that tell me? You will never win the poor on poverty. The world will never solve the problem with poverty. Only God will when He comes back. And I am getting more and more to the point where I'm saying, even so, come Lord Jesus. Come get us out of this mess, because it's getting more messier and messier. If you see what's happening in the Caucasus, Armenia and Azerbaijan are at war right now. They're actually fighting. War has broken out between those two countries. Greece and Turkey were at the brink of war. You want to know about what's going to happen in the end times? Just follow Turkey. Turkey is a key player because they are one of the nations that will lead the charge against Israel at the end of the tribulation. I don't know why I said that, but I don't think that has anything to do with the lesson.
No, we don't.
I think
That was free.
that was free also. Okay, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week as we get into lesson 38 and we continue in chapter 19 in the book of Proverbs.